Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva the author. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shinvatam Sakatha Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtanaha, Ridhyantasta Bhadrani, Vidhunoti Suritsatam.
Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, Supersoul, in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu
Abhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhagavati Utamashloke
Bhagavati Utamashloke
Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki
Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki.
By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact.
Jai.
Now we have a reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Maharaj Parikshit cursed by Brahmana boy. This is text 1, and I want to do text 2 because they kind of go together as a little unit. I hope you weren't, is that okay? You weren't attached to already studying text 2?
I don't know. I hadn't thought about it, but
Okay.
I'm not.
I just want to make sure that I didn't like take your thing away from you that you're studying on already. So we say text 1. Sutta Vacha.
Sutta Vacha.
Yo. I think I need to say this right. Huh?
So you did prepare on that, right?
Did you?
I have read it, but that's all.
Okay.
I didn't prepare it.
I didn't want it like if you had a whole bunch of
But I
preparation.
don't know, but they're both, I don't understand why you didn't do it. I just, I don't.
Because they kind of go together as a unit. I was always told you could do that.
Okay.
I mean, I've done it before. I was always told that you can, because the first one seems kind of like half of a
Okay.
unit, and the second one just kind of go together.
Okay.
Yo vai,
Yo vai,
droni,
Droni,
astra,
Astra,
viplushto.
Viplushto,
Yo vai, droni, astra, viplushto.
Yo vai,
Viplushto,
Na,
Na,
matur,
Matur,
udare,
Udare,
mrittaha.
Mitaha,
Na matur, udare, mrittaha.
Namatur Udare Mitaha,
Anugrahad,
Anugrahad,
Bhagavataha,
Bhagavataha,
Anugrahad, Bhagavata,
Anugrahad Bhagavataha,
Krishna Syad Bhuta,
Krishna Sadhuta,
Karmanaha,
Karmanaha,
Krishna Syad Bhuta Karmanaha,
Krishna Sadhuta Karmanaha,
Sutta Vacha,
Vacha,
Yovai Droni Astra Viplushto,
Vaidoni Astra Vipulosto,
Namatur Udare Mrittaha,
Namatur Udare Mitaha,
Anugrahad Bhagavata,
Anugrahad Bhagavataha,
Krishna Syad Bhuta Karmanaha,
Krishna Sadhuta Karmanaha,
Sutta Vacha,
Sutta Vacha,
Yovai Droni Astra Viplushto,
Vaidoni Astra Vipulosto,
Namatur Udare Mrittaha,
Namatur Udare Mitaha,
Anugrahad Bhagavata,
Anugrahad Bhagavataha,
Krishna Syad Bhuta Karmanaha.
Krishna Sya Bhuta Karmanaha,
Is that, I think it's 3 enough, it's not real hard. Go ahead. Let's check.
Sutta Uvacha,
Sutta Uvacha,
Yo Vaidrona Astra Vipushta,
Yo Vaidroni Astra Vipulosto,
Namatur Udare Mita,
Namatur Udare Mitaha,
Anugrahad Bhagavata,
Anugrahad Bhagavataha,
Krishna Sya Bhuta Karmanaha,
Krishna Sadhuta Karmanaha, Sutta Uvacha, Yo Vaidroni Astra Vipulosto, Namatur Udare Mitaha, Anugrahad Bhagavataha, Krishna Sadbhuta Karmanaha,
Sutta Uvacha,
Sutta Uvacha,
Yovani Jurani Astra Vipushto,
Vaidroni Astra Viplusto,
Namutra Udayam Meta,
Namatur Udare Mitaha,
Anugrahad Bhagavata,
Anugrahad Bhagavataha,
Krishna Syadutta Kamanaha,
Krishna Sadhuta Karmanaha,
Sutta Uvacha,
Yo Vajrani Ashra Vipusta,
Yo Vaidrani Asra Vipulosto,
Namatuda Mitaha,
Namutra Udayam Meta,
Anugraha Bhagavata,
Anugrahad Bhagavata,
Krishna Shabhuta Kamanaha,
Krishna Syadutta Kamanaha,
Sutta
Sutta Vacha. Yo Vaidanyastra Vipusto.
Anugrahat Bhagavatam Krishna Shabhuta
Karmana.
Sutta Vacha Yo Vaidanyastra
Udare
Anugrahat Bhagavatam Krishna Shabhuta Kamanaha.
Word meanings. Sutta Vacha.
Sutta Vacha.
Shri Sutta Goswami said.
Shri
Sutta Goswami said.
Yaha.
Yaha,
One who. By. Certainly.
Certainly.
Droni Astra.
Droni Astra.
By the weapon of the son of Drona.
by the
Son
weapon
of the son of Drona.
Viplushtaha.
Vishtaha,
Burned by.
burned by,
Na.
na,
Never.
never,
Matu.
Matu.
Of the mother.
of the mother,
Udare.
Udare.
In the womb.
in the womb,
Rittaha.
Rittaha,
Met his death.
met his death,
Anugrahat.
Anugrahat,
By the mercy.
by the mercy,
Bhagavataha.
Bhagavataha,
Of the personality of Godhead.
Of the personality of Godhead.
Krishnasya.
Krishnasya.
Krishna.
Krishna.
Adbhuta Karmanaha.
Adbhuta Karmanaha.
Who acts wonderfully.
Who acts
acts
wonderfully.
wonderfully.
The translation purport by His Divine Grace. You see Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila
I'll
Prabhupada.
read the whole thing first. Sri Sutta Goswami said, due to the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who acts wonderfully, Maharaj Parikshit, though struck by the weapon of the son of Drona in his mother's womb, could not be burned. Please repeat. Sri Sutta Goswami said,
Sri Sutta Goswami said,
due to the mercy of the personality of Godhead,
due to the mercy of the personality of Godhead,
Sri Krishna,
Sri Krishna,
who acts wonderfully,
who acts wonderfully,
Maharaj Parikshit,
Maharaj Parikshit,
though struck by the weapon of the son of Drona
though struck by the son of Drona,
in his mother's womb,
in his mother's womb,
could not be burned.
could
could not be burned.
Purport. The sages of Naimisharanya became struck with wonder after hearing about the wonderful administration of Maharaj Parikshit, especially in reference to his punishing the personality of Kali and making him completely unable to do any harm within the kingdom. Sutta Goswami was equally anxious to describe Maharaj Parikshit's wonderful birth and death, and this verse is stated by Sutta Goswami to increase the interest of the sages of Naimisharanya. So here is why in the purport it says he wanted to discuss the birth and death. And in this purport he's mentioning the birth, and then the next one it mentions briefly the death. And so it kind of goes as a unit. So I am going to read this. And maybe repeat after me so you won't miss the opportunity to repeat this. Just repeat word for word. Brahma, Kapotitan, Yas, Tu, Takshakat, Prana, Viplavat, Na. I'm going to break this one. Samu Moha, Urupayat, Bhagavati, Arpitashaya, Brahma Kopoti Tadyastu Takshakat Pranaviplavat Nasamu Mohorupayat Bhagavati Arpitashaya. So, should I do the word? Do you want to do the word meanings or?
Yeah.
Okay. Brahmakopa, fury of a Brahmana.
Fury of a Brahmana.
Utitat, caused by. Yaha, what was. Tu, but. Takshakat, by the snake bird. Pranaviplavat, from dissolution of life.
From dissolution of life.
Na,
Nah,
Never.
never.
Samumoha
Samumoha
was overwhelmed.
was overwhelmed.
Urupayat,
Urupayat,
great fear.
great fear.
Bhagavati,
Bhagavati,
unto the personality of Godhead.
Unto the personality of Godhead.
Arpita,
Apita,
surrendered.
surrendered.
Ashraya,
Ashrayaha,
consciousness.
consciousness.
And this purport goes, furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear, due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. Anybody want to repeat this?
Can you put the two together and so we see how it
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This one says, Suta Goswami said, due to the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who acts wonderfully, Maharaj Parikshit, although struck by the weapon of the son of Drona in his mother's womb, could not be burned. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. So not only is the word furthermore timed together, but also this one is about the birth and one is about the death, and they're contrasting a little bit. He was protected in his birth because he's a great devotee, and then he was surrendered and not afraid about his death. So, and in between is like parentheses on the outside, and in between is this great rule that the sages were amazed by. So Suta Goswami wanted to talk about the two ends more. He already talked about the birth, but he was just kind of repeating it to contrast it with the end a little bit. And so he already said that in a previous chapter, but now he's going to talk about the death. So I'll read the purport. A self-surrendered devotee of the Lord is called Narayana Parayana. Such a person is never afraid of any place or person, not even of death. For him nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord, and thus he gives equal importance to heaven and hell. He knows well that both heaven and hell are creations of the Lord, and similarly, life and death are different conditions of existence created by the Lord. But in all conditions and in all circumstances, remembrance of Narayan is essential. The Narayana Parayana practices this constantly. Maharaj Parikshit was such a pure devotee. He was wrongfully cursed by an inexperienced son of a Brahmana who was under the influence of Kali. And Maharaj Parikshit took this to be sent by Narayan. He knew that Narayana, Lord Krishna, had saved him when he was burned in the womb of his mother, and if he were to be killed by a snake bite, it would also take place by the will of the Lord. The devotee never goes against the will of the Lord. Anything sent by God is a blessing for the devotee. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit was neither afraid of nor bewildered by such things. That is the sign of a pure devotee of the Lord. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. Offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So, if I were to just do the first verse, it would feel like I was doing half. So, because it's mentioned about the death, and we already talked about the birth, so that's why I wanted to do them together. I started thinking about this, thinking, like I just said, that the two ends of the life, and within which is this great rule that the sages are so impressed about. You know, that they're so struck with wonder. And so it was really great that he actually, even though he did not kill Kali, he did not allow Kali to have any influence. And so this was very wonderful, and therefore the sages, even after his passing, the sages are still protected by that influence. And therefore they are able to do this sacrifice, which later on we'll notice is not so satisfying the sacrifice itself. It's the chance to get to hear the Bhagavatam that is the most important part. And the hearing of the Bhagavatam is the whole clue to this whole thing, this whole birth and death of Maharaj Parikshit as well. So the lifetime of him protected the opportunity to hear the Bhagavatam, and the birth and death are also really key here. So And this contrast is really interesting. Why in this birth, he's a great devotee, so he's protected by Krishna. He's protected so explicitly and personally and uniquely that Krishna's right there in the womb, visibly protecting him from this Brahmastra weapon. And so his name, Parikshit, means examiner, because he grew up, he saw as a child, and he always, whether he specifically remembered being in the womb or not, I don't know, but he was always looking for this wonderful person. He examined everybody to see if this is that wonderful person. So he was somehow always looking for Krishna. And therefore he was always thinking of Krishna. And he was always in a sense, he was always in the mood of separation because he was seeking Krishna. And he was completely devoted to Krishna. And he ruled his kingdom in the same mood as Arjuna learned from Krishna in the Bhagavatam as a duty to do the right thing. So he was always acting by duty. So then his death, why was he not protected when his death time came? It was pretty unusual. He was controlling Kali. He was keeping Kali from having any foothold. And yet, Kali got an influence in the little Brahmana boy. Because Kali was coming. You know, the age of Kali was starting. It wasn't Krishna, Parikshit couldn't stop time. He just controlled Kali's activities. But then Kali got in the little Brahmana boy's heart, and he actually personally got cursed to die by Kali. So, and he wasn't protected. After he was protected in his birth, and he wasn't protected and for his death. And why is that? There's this all centered on the Bhagavatam, because it's all about speaking the Bhagavatam. So then I was thinking how knowledge gets disseminated. He was speaking the Bhagavatam. Sutta Goswami spoke the Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. All the sages gathered and they heard, and one of them repeated it to another gathering of sages. And somehow from there, we have it. So it gets passed on and it gets spread. And how it seems so narrow and limited, but so few people. However, everybody gets, because the whole system of reincarnation and spiritual advancement, birth by birth, and these things, different levels one can be in one's life. If one does one's best, one's sincere best, one gets to be closer to Krishna in the next birth. So eventually, souls find their way, and Krishna does not overlook anybody. So, thinking about it, after the Battle of Kurukshetra, when the world unity was starting to break down, because so many millions of good men died, and then now things start picking up in what most people think is the beginning of recorded history, about maybe 1,000 years after the Battle of Kurukshetra. And within these different areas of different isolated recorded histories, different religions come up. And if one follows the religion sincerely, well, one is making some advancement. Even though maybe the philosophy is not correct or complete. Maybe some of the religions are like demigod worship. And so at least, you're worshiping somebody greater than you make some advancement. Or, like Christianity, we can compare with Krishna conscious philosophy, and the Christianity philosophy that has been decided upon and presented to us is not quite accurate. Nevertheless, Jesus Christ, a great devotee of the Lord, if one listens to his words and tries to become a devotee of the Lord in the same way, then Jesus shows us how to start walking the path. And so then one can come closer. So this way, this reaches millions of people at the different levels that they're at. And then comes Prabhupada and distributes these books. Well, at first they started writing, Vyasadeva started writing it down on some palm leaves, and he wrote it down on some palm leaves. And then maybe it got copied. And it gradually, just think how much it has grown. And now there are millions and millions of copies of Prabhupada's books all over the world. So it's this broadening out and broadening out. And because of, it seems like really narrow for a long time, well, because of reincarnation, it all works. It just takes a few births to get there. So we may have been, because we're here, we may have done, they say, that to be in the Krishna consciousness movement, one had to have done pious activities. So perhaps we have Sometimes this causeless mercy, but there have been some pious activities making certain individual souls more receptive in seeking this. So anyway, this is how it all goes, and it's all about the Bhagavatam. So speaking of the Bhagavatam, and so in the first canto, let's see, chapter 2, it's not in this book, let me see, I'll just find it here. Chapter 3, actually. 40. Chapter 3 is about listing all the incarnations, but text 40 is an answer to the sages. The sages asked a question in chapter 1. To whom have the religious principles gone for shelter after Krishna has left? Now what? Krishna is gone, how are we going to... Krishna comes to re-establish religious principles. Now he's gone. So now, to whom will the religious principles go for shelter? Where will they go for shelter? Well, the answer is in chapter 3, text 40, which says, I'm going to read about 3 or 4 verses here. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the self-realized, after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe. Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn delivered the Bhagavatam to the great Emperor Parikshit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So I read the last one too. This last one in chapter 3, 44. O learned Brahmanas, when Shukadeva Goswami recited Bhagavatam there in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it. So, the Bhagavatam is the shelter of the religious principles, and it's all about Maharaj Parikshit's whole life, his birth, his great rule, and his death, and his manner of death of accepting it, and hearing from Shukadeva Goswami in the presence of the sages, all made possible by his rule. Then all of this is for the reciting of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then as time passes, as centuries passes, it comes to the point where it's spread all over the world to everybody, all kinds of common people, etc. Everybody. So this is the amazing story of the Srimad Bhagavatam and how little and simple it seems to start. And same with the Bhagavad Gita, and then in the Bhagavatam in the 11th canto there's the Uddhava Gita. So these are private conversations. I don't know if Uddhava Gita was overheard by other sages. I don't think it was. But Arjuna's talk was overheard. And it's supposed to be everybody around there. At least we know that Srila Vyasadeva overheard it and wrote it down. So then we can read the Bhagavad Gita. And the Uddhava Gita, Uddhava was giving last instructions from Krishna before Krishna's departure. And Uddhava, what did he do? He went to Narayan. Madhava-priya, yeah. He went there to meditate. He must have taught it to somebody because somehow it spread, the Uddhava Gita, and somehow it spread, or Srila Vyasadeva heard it, he wrote it down, he could see past, present, and future. Somehow that private conversation got spread to everybody. So over time it gets bigger and bigger until it spreads to everybody. And also I was thinking in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, in the end of the introduction, it has these verses from Gita Mahatmya. I'm not sure, it might be a different Gita Mahamaya from one we read sometimes in connection with the Kadashis, because that one is, it seems to be saying different things. So this one, okay. Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dota Gopala Nandanaha Parto Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dutam Gita Mritam Mahat. This Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads, is just like a cow. And Lord Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is just like a calf. And learned scholars and pure devotees are to drink the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. So what does the calf do? The calf makes the milk come down, because then the mother cow feels that affection and wants to feed the calf. If the calf is nearby, the milk comes down. So the milk is the knowledge. And it comes down because Arjuna is such an eager student. And then Krishna wanted to see. Krishna is a cowherd boy. He's milking the cow. The cow is actually the body of knowledge then. And of course it's not different from Krishna in a sense. But Krishna is the cowherd boy milking. Arjuna is the calf that brings the milk down by the mother's affection. So this knowledge has affection for Arjuna, wants to, this form of Krishna, this knowledge, wants to give to Arjuna. So it gives to the milker, Krishna, in the chariot, who's answering questions. And the sages drink the milk. So the sages are drinking the milk. Parikshit Maharaj is the cow, is the calf. And let's see, Shukadeva Goswami is milking the body of knowledge. So Shukadeva Goswami is milking, and it comes out, for the calf is so eager that it comes out with great enthusiasm. And then the sages who are sitting around, they drink the nectarian milk, and gradually they pass it on.
I just gave him advice that you asked who Uddhava spoke to. It's in the 11th canto.
Oh.
And so
She
had told me.
Okay. Huh?
You had told me to.
Yeah, we have talked about the Uddhava Gita lately. So thanks.
should be a comments on here because she's been reading the
Yeah, we have.
She could talk about Uddhava. But the Uddhava Gita is the same material as the Bhagavad Gita, but different. It has a different slant because it's a lot about renunciation. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna didn't really want Arjuna to renounce. He wanted him to be a great hero. So he didn't want it would be like humiliating for Arjuna, and would Krishna could run the whole war by himself, no problem. But he really wanted to be pleased with how great of a hero Arjuna was, and he didn't want to be disappointed from that. So he wanted Arjuna to be the great hero, and so he didn't want to. He did talk about renunciation, but he really didn't want Arjuna to do it. So he kind of stressed karma yoga, and then total surrender to do whatever Krishna wants, which is in that situation was the same activity as karma yoga. In other words, do your duty. Am I talking too close? Do your duty for Krishna. And then Krishna wants you to do the same activity. So in Arjuna's case, karma yoga and bhakti yoga turned out to be identical. So, but he didn't want to talk too much about renunciation. So he kind of made up for it talking to Uddhava. So he talked a lot about renunciation and actually the realizations one can get on, even like on one's own, I would have to say, super soul and heart, but realizations, that foundational realizations one can get by renunciation, about not being the body, being the soul, like that. He talks a lot about that in the Uddhava Gita. So, and he talks about everything. So it's, one can study, I know it's like, one can take these parts of books, like one can, the Bhagavad Gita is a part of the Mahabharata. The Uddhava Gita is a part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first canto is a part of it. You can take these as books in themselves and study them as units, like they're complete books. And that's a very fascinating thing to do. So, and I know that in verse 2, it's a lot about not having fear of death, which I can tie it together this way, that if one has this knowledge, one doesn't have fear of death. I just read on the internet, somebody is posting some translations of the Mahabharata, of the war, what the war was like. Somebody's posting these lengthy translations. And so at one point, there was, after the first day, Maharaj Yudhishthira became quite discouraged, and he took a notion, maybe I should renounce, because not so many people will be killed, because nobody can stop Bhishma, and he's just killing, and nobody can stop him. So he took a notion he should renounce, but he didn't need to have a philosophical talk. He was encouraged by everybody saying, "Oh, we're going to do it, we're going to fight," and then he took courage again. And that it was after the war. He had to have the philosophy. But Arjuna needed the philosophy before the war even started. So then it was like mentioning, Yudhishthira was all emotional about we may lose because we can't stop Bhishma. And he's saying, well, at least Bhima's really angry, he's fighting, but Arjuna seems so detached. Well, why is Arjuna detached? But he was still fighting like a hero, but he was detached because he had philosophical knowledge. So when one has philosophical knowledge, one isn't afraid of one's death or anybody else's death. Not that it's fine if you're supposed to take proper action to prevent death, unless you're in a war, then you have to take proper action to cause death. But this knowledge cures our fear, because we understand that we're eternal spirit souls. And we get deeper and deeper understanding of that. The more of these units, like books in themselves, that we find in Prabhupada's books and study them, we keep on getting deeper and deeper realization of how we are eternal spirit souls and not this body. So as we read, we practice thinking about our lives. We naturally will practice thinking about our lives and make progress that way. So I think I will stop here. Yes.
So the first speaking of Srimad Bhagavatam was Vyasadeva, correct? And Vyasadeva, he spoke it to his son, yes. Sukadeva, and Sukadeva yes. remembered it, right? He's one of those, what's the word, when you remember Shmriti or something, when you remember everything. So he just remembered it and spoke it to Maharaj Parikshit, right?
Ganesh was there compiling.
Oh, Ganesh was there when Vyasadeva
wrote it down,
speaking it to Sukadeva Goswami. So Ganesh was writing it down, and then Sutta Goswami was present when it was being spoken to Maharaj Parikshit. So he's the one who repeated it later. Namasharanya, sages. So at that point, was it already like a book that he could just be reciting from? No, or he just wrote it from memory.
I don't know.
I think it's something that's evolving. That it's just like spiritual life, it's progressive, and the stories of the incarnations of God. Vyasadeva was describing all the various incarnations and so on and so forth like that. He was also Trikala Gyan, so his vision was he already saw what was about to happen. And I wanted to mention, not to get off her point, but Arjuna was renounced or detached. First of all, you said he wanted to renounce, but he did renounce, but he acted with renunciation, and he also knew the result. He already knew the result of the battle. He saw it in universal form. He knew it. He already knew. But as far as like the question of was it written?
If you say Ganesh was writing it, was it in a form of a book when Sutta Goswami?
I don't know.
Recited it.
I don't know.
Because when did it get in our hands, or when did it get down from Prabhupada? Translating it and everything. It must have been around for a while. So when did it actually be official?
There is a confusing point where he got it and he wrote it down. He taught it to Shukadeva Goswami, and then Shukadeva Goswami spoke it, and then the sages repeated it, and somehow that was in the recording because Srila Vyasadeva could see past, present, and future. And that's a confusing little point. It sort of jumps our logical understanding. Other than that, it's like you say, progressive. Actually, it didn't start with Vyasadeva. He just wrote it down. He just compiled. And it's made up of teachings of spiritual masters to questioning disciples. He collected all this, and all it was that first started with 4 verses spoken by Krishna to Lord Brahma. When Lord Brahma in his meditation was allowed to really actually go to the spiritual world and see Krishna.
And it's amazing that Vyasadeva knew all of that.
it expands on it. Actually, Lord Brahma was told 4 verses and he said, now go and expand on this and teach it. So, how is
We
this?
got it from Narada Muni. Brahma taught Narada Muni.
But he expanded on it somewhat. He said more than 4 things.
But he learned the actual specific succession is Brahma, Narada, Vyas. Yeah, he made.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm sorry if I skipped Narada, but what I mean is, it was the specifics of the knowledge. Brahma answered Narada Muni, and he answered with more sentences than Krishna gave him. Krishna gave him 4 verses and told him to expand on this and teach it. Narada received more than 4 verses. He received a whole long discussion. And then so much time passed and various spiritual masters taught, because Srila Vyasadeva just compiled this. But Srila Vyasadeva did so under the instruction of Narada Muni, who told him what was important about it and told him to write about that. So then it's very personal. It's very personal how this thing grows, and it's all made possible by the super soul in the heart, because the Bhagavad Gita 10th canto said, Krishna says, I'm dwelling in the heart, and I shine a lamp of knowledge. So we may read something intellectually, but then we know the words and we know what it says, but we won't have any realization without the Lord in our heart, making it alive. Then we will explain it to somebody else. We explain it maybe in our own words. Maybe we'll quote, maybe we won't quote. We'll explain it from our realization. And this is what's been going on all along. The point is, it has to be correct knowledge, which is possible with the guidance of the spiritual master and handing it down. It's actually really complicated, but very personal. And in Bhagavad Gita, it says, in 434 it says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. It doesn't say, try to learn the truth by approaching scripture, although that's part of it. But what is scripture? Collection of what the spiritual master said. If you go to a spiritual master who has seen the truth, he can tell you the truth, but it might be his particular flavor, and another spiritual master might tell it his particular flavor, as long as it's correct. Might appear to be a contradiction even sometimes, but when we grow and understand, we understand it's not a contradiction, it's a big picture. This one is from this angle, this one is from this angle, and it's all the same picture. It's very personal. It's just it's all totally personal. So it's not like the scripture is some kind of like legal document that's handed down like on tablets of stone or something, and this is the absolute. The absolute is Krishna, and the absolute is personal, and he explains to Brahma, to Arjuna, etc. So, any more questions about that? Is that okay? Make sense?
I have a question about something else though, that's not
Okay.
related to class.
Oh. Should we go there? Anybody else have
No,
anything?
separate from class. You can end the video, I guess.
Okay. Nobody else has any hand up. Almost somebody left on. Okay, so thank you all very much. And all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam and all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Okay.